Hello and welcome to Kiwi and Pixel the Parakeets. I've got this new setup here with some lights and it probably makes my scalp a little bit shiny, but hey, it's what all the vloggers do, right? So we're going to try this out. Got my little Shure microphone here all set up, recording the audio, and today we're going to be talking about top 10 Budgie FAQs. So let's start off with one of the very first basic questions we get when people ask us about budgies. Number one, how long do budgies live? And the answer to that really depends on how well they're cared for and whether they fight any diseases off. But typically you'd expect that a budgie can live about 8 to 15 years. I've heard of them living maybe up to 18 years, but really never anything longer than that. We're hoping that these guys live a long time. Kiwi is 3.5 years old at this point, and Pixel is about 8 months old at this point, and they're very healthy young birds, and we expect to get many more years out of them with good health. He just said good birds. All right, so question number two. What do you feed them? What do budgies eat? They eat a lot of things. Mostly in the wild, budgies subsist on, to my understanding, a mixture of seeds and grains. So that's sort of what we try and feed them in captivity, is seeds and grains. There are some genius people out there that have come up with this idea that you can feed parrots and smaller parrots like budgies and parakeets pellets. And these pellets are formulated from greens, from various things that are healthy. And we use Harrison's Superfine Adult Lifetime. These are little tiny pellets that are about the same size as seeds. And these allow your bird to treat them as food. Some larger pellets your bird might reject as being not food. And so those are what we use. And so far we've had great luck getting Pixel now, after a while, finally adjusted over to those. And Kiwi's been eating those for a couple of years. So two happy birds eating mostly these Harrison's Superfine pellets, in addition to freshly picked, freshly purchased produce, greens such as cilantro, celery leaves, carrots, apples, all sorts of stuff. There's a small list of things that you cannot, in fact, probably not such a small list of things that you cannot feed parakeets, but there's a ton of things that you can feed them, including things that you might not find so intuitive, like egg whites, boiled egg whites. They love those. Our budgies go absolutely crazy for these things. So yeah, it's something you might want to try with your birds. I've also heard of people feeding their birds chicken, like cooked plain chicken. And that might be a little bit cannibalistic for these guys, but I'm not terribly opposed to trying that at some point. Question number three about parakeets, or budgies, is, are they parrots? Can they talk? I guess that's questions 3 and 4. Yes, they are parrots, to answer number 3. They are a subspecies of parakeets, which are a subspecies of parrot. So yes, all budgies are parrots, but not all parrots are budgies. Same with parakeets. All budgies are parakeets, but not all parakeets are budgies. So people ask me, I think it's a regional thing. Sometimes people ask, well, that's not a parakeet, that's a budgie. Well, yes, it is. It is in fact a parakeet, which its subspecies is a budgie. So that's hope to clear that one up for you guys. Let's see. Next question was, do they talk? Can they talk? Yes, because they are a type of parrot, they talk very well. In fact, budgies are the number 1 or number 2 species of talking parrot, right up there with the African gray. I think African gray might actually be number 1. And they have extensive vocabularies if you develop them. So that's something I can get into in another video. Basically, what does it take to get a parakeet to talk? But yes, they are prolific talkers. Kiwi knows about 50 to 60 words and probably about 15 different phrases, which is substantial. And Pixel's getting there. Pixel probably knows about 10, 15 words, most of which he's learned from Kiwi. But yes, budgies can talk. Question number 6. Can I have a male and female parakeet together? Or if not, how do I pair them? The answer really lies in whether or not you want baby budgies. And in our case, we do not want baby budgies. So we got 2 male parakeets. We had the first one for about 3 years before we got the second one, and we opted to DNA test the second one just to make sure that it was going to be a male before we took him home. And the reason for that is that A, we don't want baby budgies, and B, it is my understanding that 2 male parakeets are less territorial than 2 female parakeets. Female parakeets have a lot of nesting behavior, and so they're a lot more territorial about what's inside their cages. So, we started off with 1 male, so that eliminates having 2 females. And we didn't want baby budgies, so that eliminates having a male and a female. So we got a second male. It's all up to you. Some people have mixtures of budgies, and they like to have all sorts of baby budgies and let the parents raise the eggs and the babies, but just not something we're into doing. So yeah, that's basically your answer there. Question number 6, I believe, is what temperature, what kind of climate can you keep parakeets in? And this answer may surprise people a little bit, but parakeets are actually native to Australia, which means they like dry, warm climates. So these are not birds that survive in cold weather. If you live in a place that is very cold outside, that your house might be drafty, you might have to think twice and think very, very carefully about whether or not a parakeet is for you. We live in California. The weather here is very Mediterranean. It gets a little bit cold in the winters, but it also gets really hot in the summers for the most part. And so during the winter, we run the heater in the house, and we try and keep the house somewhere around 68 degrees. That is probably on the coolest end that you want for your parakeets. Some people build aviaries outside that get a little bit colder, but I think you risk losing some parakeets if it's a little bit too cold. So the one thing you have to make sure of when you keep parakeets inside near the heat is that they're not under a vent. In our case here, we have a vent that is pretty close to the cages, but the heater really only runs when the cage is covered. So late at night, early in the morning, during the day, it doesn't run while the cages are uncovered and we're not here. So yeah, it maintains a pretty stable 68 to 70 degree temperature for the birds, and they love it. They're very healthy. One thing you should know about bird temperature is that when they get sick, when they get ill, you need to keep them in a warm place that is absolutely as far away from drafts as you can possibly get. So we've had cases where Kiwi was not feeling so well, and a case recently where Pixel wasn't feeling so well. And you can see the difference. It's like night and day when they're in a cooler room versus a warmer room. It really makes a huge difference as to the health of the bird and how fast they recover. Next question is about the colors, the number of colors that birds come in, that parakeets come in. And this is kind of a complex answer that I don't know much about. I have a fairly basic understanding of genetics and how that works. But the default, so to speak, the default color for a parakeet is green and yellow. And there are all sorts of different colors that they come in, but every color except for the green and yellow is a mutation. So the most common mutation, I think, is the blue and white color, which is one that you see really often when you go to the pet store and they have parakeets in cages. You see the green and yellow ones, and you see the blue and white ones. So we have one of each of those, and but they come in all sorts of varieties, all sorts of colors. And there's all sorts of fancy names. There's a bunch of Facebook groups where people ID the mutations of the parakeets, and it's actually kind of fascinating to look at. But yeah, you just have to look around. There are definitely some really rare ones. My understanding is that there's no gene for red color in parakeets, so you're never going to get a parakeet that's truly purple. But you do get some really, really rich blue colors that almost look purple. So that's the way it's been explained to me, and yeah, that's what colors parakeets come in. They come in all sorts of yellows and blues and greens and white even. I don't know if I don't think they're albino, but they're very, very white. Anyway, someone here in the comments can chime in, I'm sure, and completely put me to shame in terms of my knowledge of bird color genetics. Why are these little pins sticking out of their head, and what are these white things that you see all over their bodies after about 3 to 6 months once you've had them for a little while? And that is when your bird is molting. Just like humans, they shed their skin, so to speak, and in birds' cases, they shed their feathers. And what happens is that their feathers fall out little by little. Some birds do it mostly all at once. Some birds do it over a longer period of time, like 6 months, or some birds kind of constantly molt. They lose their feathers, and then new ones come in. And new feathers don't just grow out of their skin. They come out in this sort of white sheath, and that is called a pin feather. And what happens is that once the feather is long enough, the white sheath falls off of the pin feather, and the feather goes poof, and it comes out, and you've got a fairly mature feather. There's one complication that I've done a couple of videos about, which is blood feathers, and this is where a feather that's mostly developed has come in, but has broken but it still has a blood supply going to it while it's growing. And this can be really dangerous because if that snaps and blood is coming out of the feather, there's nothing to coagulate that blood or to stop it very easily. So there's a whole bunch of things that you should know about blood feathers, but this is not the video for it. Next question is, how big of a cage should I keep my parakeet in, and how many parakeets can I have in one cage? And this is a question that you can get all sorts of responses about. Really, it runs the gamut. The only thing I caution is do not buy a round cage for your bird. Any bird at all, do not buy a round cage. Birds like corners. They like places to feel safe. So if you have a round cage, they have nowhere to feel safe inside their cage. So what I recommend is a square or rectangular cage. We use the Vision bird cages, both the L01 and the M01 bird cages, which are fantastic. They're really well built. Some people complain because they don't have a pull-out drawer so that you can clean them easily, but we find that the guard that goes around the edge really does keep everything from flying out of the cage, and that sort of minimalizes the amount of stuff that we have to clean up outside of the cage. So everything stays in. You just take the top off the cage, a couple clips come off, and you pop the top off, clean the grate and the bottom portion of the cage, put new paper in, and you're all set to go. We have our birds in 2 separate cages. The reason for that being that they are still a little bit territorial. I know I said that male parakeets aren't as territorial, but these guys are a little bit. They love to play around with each other, but after a while, once they're sick of each other, they start to get a little bit nippy at each other, so we keep them in separate cages. And also, if you're really trying to keep your birds tame to you, to the human, it's a good idea to have them separate from each other. This is an opinion that is not always going to be super popular, but so it works for us, and we have 2 really, really tame birds as a result. One question that's a little bit controversial that I'll get into is, should I clip my bird's wings, the wing feathers? And the answer to this question is, it depends. You know, if you live in an environment where the birds are prone to flying into things that might be hazardous to them, and your birds aren't very tame, it might be a better idea to clip their wings. It's not painful to the bird, but the argument against it is that it's not natural. And yeah, it's not. Birds' wings don't get clipped in the wild. They enjoy their full length of flight feathers for their entire lifetime. So right now that our birds are fully flighted, they've been acclimated to our house, they live in a space that's pretty safe for them, we have stopped clipping our birds' wings. And this allows them to fly out around the room. And to us, in my opinion, they actually handle a little bit better when they're not trimmed, because they know they can fly away if there's danger. If they're always thinking that they're going to be in danger, they're not as tame. They're nervous about not being able to get away from danger. So we found that our birds actually bite us less when their wings are not clipped and they're fully flighted. One of the questions we get pretty often is about toys and what kind of toys you should get your parakeet. And for us, it's sort of been just kind of random. We buy whatever we see at the pet store that looks fun, and it's been kind of an adventure to see which bird likes which toy. Pixel, our blue bird, really likes toys he can shred. He shreds everything we put in the cage, and it's really awesome. Kiwi, on the other hand, just sort of likes to bat things around and play with them. He doesn't really bite them up as much, so as a result, the 2 birds like different kinds of toys. Don't really have any brand recommendations for those, because a lot of the stuff in the pet stores is kind of no-name brand. Some of it doesn't even have tags at all. But yeah, just take a look, buy some toys. Bird toys are really cheap in our experience, $3, $4, $5 for a toy. And try them out. A lot of fun. It might take a long time for your bird to acclimate. In fact, it's taken months for our birds to use some of the toys that we got, because it's a new thing in their cage, and new things are scary for parakeets. And so we just let them acclimate to the toy for a while, and then we see them sort of batting it around, and then after a while they'll peck at it a little bit, and all of a sudden they're just playing with the toy full on. We got Kiwi this little swinging perch that he absolutely hated. I'd put him on the perch, and he'd fly off of it, and he would never go up on there on his own. And then we put it in Pixel's cage once we got Pixel, and now he sleeps on it. He just loves the thing. So anyway, yeah, that's you just got to experiment a bit. Same with foods. If they don't like a certain food when you first give it to them, just try it over and over and over again. Repetition is the key. They have to get acclimated to things. They take a lot longer than you might think to get used to things. All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed this series of Parakeet FAQ questions. Feel free to like and subscribe down there, and send us your own questions. We'd love to do another video, put together some real questions. I'm not even really going off of a list. I'm just sort of going off of what people have asked us before. Yeah, this is really fun here. The birds love the attention. They love it when we're in here talking to them. So yeah, please send us some more questions, and we'd be happy to answer them. So anyway, you've been watching Kiwi and Pixel the Parakeets, and we hope you come back. Thanks.